Uh, Center for Science and Environment has been involved watching, evaluating, analyzing CDM for a long time. Uh, and we have been quite critical of CDM as it has performed. Uh, we very strongly believe that a major reform is required in CDM mechanism for it to deliver what it was meant to be. And I can tell you way back, almost 5 or 6 years back, we did a very detailed evaluation of a certain category of CDM projects, which are called as HFC gas projects. At that point of time, these projects were very big projects. As you know, in the refrigeration industry, you need CFC and HFC gas, as a coolant. Now, the global warming potential of these gases are 11,000, 12,000 times more than carbon dioxide. It means that if you reduce 1 ton of HFC gas, don't allow it to get emitted into the atmosphere, then you get 11,000 carbon credits. That is the scale of these projects. And when we evaluated these projects way back, I think in 2004 or 2005, we found that most of these projects were investing 10 crore rupees and were getting 800 crore, 900 crore rupees from the CDM market without doing anything. And we also found that all these projects, the PDD, the project document based on which CDM is given clearance, was actually a copy-paste job. And we down to earth did a major cover story on it. We took this issue to the CDM Executive Board, international body which registers the CDM projects. And there was some reform that was done. And we have been watching CDM projects since then. My presentation today will give you some basics about what CDM is all about. What is clean development mechanism? And what are the statistics on clean development mechanism? What are the problems in clean development mechanism? And what kind of reform is required for clean development mechanism to actually lead to transition to low carbon technology in developing countries like India. So that's what my presentation is about. Let me start by telling you that clean development mechanism is a Kyoto mechanism. It's part of Kyoto Protocol, which actually allows developed countries to purchase carbon credits from developing countries like India and to meet their emission reduction targets. That's what clean development mechanism is all about. But there are two fundamental things in clean development mechanism which people tend to forget. One, that it came into existence because the word was flexibility, but the real meaning was cheap, because developed countries wanted cheap reduction options. They wanted to reduce emissions cheaply in the developing countries so that they don't have huge financial burden in reducing their emissions. That was point number one. The second point was that while doing this emission reduction, CDM projects should lead to sustainable development in developing countries. That was the second point. So the two main goals of CDM was to reduce emissions cheaply and to lead to sustainable development in developing countries. Cheap emission, yes, but I think sustainable development has been forgotten. Another important point about CDM project is that a project will be classified as a CDM project if it is an additional project, which means that it is a new project that would have not happened in business as usual scenario. There are a lot of things which happens in business as usual scenario. A government would like to do something, or an industry would like to improve its efficiency on its own because it is financially attractive. So that's a business as usual program. So a CDM project is one which is additional, which means it is not a business as usual project. Now both these words, and I'll come back to these two words later on, additional and sustainable development are major problems in CDM today. Just to tell you about the process, how does the CDM process works? A project proponent hires a consultant to make something called as project design document or PDT. One of the important part of this PDT making is that there will be a stakeholder meeting with the local community, which will assess the sustainability of the project. So A PDD will say that a project is sustainable only when it has done consultation with the local community. So it's a very, very important part of making PDD, and I'll come back and explain it to you how it is flouted every day. The second is, once a PDD is made, it has to be approved by national government. So for example, in India, we have National CDM Authority, which will approve the project and also give a certificate that this is a sustainable project, that this project will contribute to sustainable development. I hope some of you have heard about WikiLeaks and WikiLeaks on CDM. And there a Government of India representative is quoted as saying that we take project documents on face value. We don't evaluate it. So we give certificate of sustainability based on what project proponent tell us. Okay? So the fact is, not even a single project has ever been rejected across the world on sustainability criteria. Every project is sustainable. What happens next? When a government gives its go-ahead, there is a private validator who is hired by company to verify the project, and that validator takes the project to the CDM board. The CDM board gives approval based on the validators or DOE report and registers the project. Every year, how much emission reduction has been done by the project is again verified, and then CDM board issues CERs. That's what the process is all about. But when you analyze the process, you find that this is a process which is a private process. Designed for private sector, verified by private sector, validated by private sector. The government role is minimal in this entire process. The auditor verifies that it is an additional project. The auditor verifies it is a sustainable project. Government just puts a stamp saying it is sustainable. That's what the process is. And therefore, the system is actually riddled with a lot of conflict of interest. I pay a private sector to certify I am good. Very, very good. That's how this system works. And in fact, CDM board has a lot of problem itself, but it did blacklist one of the major verifiers in 2008, DNV, a major consulting company, for a few months, because the CDM board found that it verified 5 projects, gave verification reports without surveying the projects. So this case came out, therefore the consultant was blacklisted. Therefore, there is a huge question mark on additionality of the project, whether the project is additional or not, and I'll explain it later to you, and whether the project is sustainable or not. Both the objective of CDM, additionality, and there is a problem in additionality, but also sustainability, both are in big, there is a huge question mark on both these issues. Before I get to additionality and sustainability, let me give you a statistics about CDM. This is a global statistics. Till November 2011, about 3,570 projects were registered by CDM board. 46% of these projects are from China, 21% from India, then the next largest is Brazil, about 5.5%. So India and China together account for 2/3 of all the CDM projects. How many CERs? These 3,570 projects will annually give about 500 million certified emission reductions. It is equivalent to 500 million tons of carbon dioxide till 2012 every year. Or about 2 billion CERs, 2 billion ton of carbon dioxide are expected from these projects till 2012. About 744 million CERs have been issued so far. So you must understand, under Kyoto Protocol, developed countries have commitment between 2008 to 2012 with respect to 1990. So this 5-year period, the 3,571 project will give offsets to developed countries, which is equivalent to 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide. That is the scale of CDM. What kind of projects? Majority of projects are energy projects, which is renewable energy or non-renewable energy. So there are a lot of non-renewable energy projects which will lead to some carbon reduction that are also registered. And then there is waste heat recovery projects. So it's largely energy sector projects that have been registered for CDM. This is the statistics for India. India so far has registered 740 projects with an annual average reduction of 60 million tons of carbon dioxide. And by 2012, and about 122 million CERs have been issued to Indian companies so far. And if you look at what kind of projects are there from India, 1/4 of project is wind power, 1/4 is biomass, 12% hydro, and waste gas heat utilization is about 11%. So about 3/4 of the project are energy and waste energy recovery projects. That's the pie chart for India. Now, what does these numbers mean? I just said 744 million CERs given given by CDM board, 2 billion by 2012. What does it mean? Now, under the Kyoto Protocol, as you know, US has not signed on to Kyoto Protocol. There are Annex 1 countries, excluding US, have to reduce their emission by 4.2%. The total Annex 1 had to reduce by 5.2%. But if you exclude US, which is not the party to the Kyoto Protocol, then the Kyoto parties now have to reduce their emission by 4.2% below 1990 level by 2008. Their emission in 1990 was 12.57 billion ton carbon dioxide equivalent. They have to get down to 12.06 billion ton carbon dioxide equivalent between 2008 and 2012 period. Therefore, they have to reduce annually about 500 million ton of carbon dioxide between 2008 and 2012, which in total means 2.5 billion ton of carbon dioxide. 744 million CERs issued so far, therefore, is sufficient to already offset about 30% of their commitment. So whatever CDM board has issued so far will offset 30% of Kyoto parties' emission reduction targets. The 2 billion CERs, which is expected to come by 2012, will offset more than 75% of their commitment. Now, there is a term called hot air, which I'll explain in the next slide. With hot air and CDM, actually developed countries don't need to do any reduction if they decide to. More than 75% as CDM from developing countries, hot air, which is far larger in number than CDM, and they don't need to do any emission reduction if they decide not to do. And a lot of countries actually will use CDM and hot air to actually meet their Kyoto targets. Australia and Canada are prime example. Australia's emission is 40% above their target. Canada is 20% above their target. They have exceeded their emission target by 20%. They both are not going to meet any emission target. And therefore, they will use CDM and hot air to meet their Kyoto targets. Now, what is hot air? Now, this graph, if you see, Sunita showed you this graph yesterday. Okay. Now, this is the trajectory of erstwhile USSR and Eastern European countries. Their target under Kyoto Protocol is to be at 1990 level by 2008 and 2012 period. So they don't have to reduce, they have to stabilize their emission in 2008 to 2012 level to 1990 level. That's their target. But after the breakup of USSR, their entire economy collapsed. And they are today close to 35% below 1990 level. Now this area, they had to be at 1990 level, but they are 35% below 1990 level. This gap, balance between what they had to achieve and what they are right now, is the balanced carbon which they can trade in the international market. They will say, I have achieved more than what I was required, and that balance is called as hot air because they have done nothing to reduce that emission, and they can trade in the international market. Now that hot air is between 7 to 12 billion ton, will be between 7 to 12 billion ton of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2012, which can be sold. So with CDM and this 7 to 20 billion ton, developed countries don't need to do any emission reduction. In fact, they can increase it. And one of the topic for discussion in Durban will be that Russia and other countries, Ukraine and Russia, are demanding that this hot air be transferred to beyond 2012 commitment, because in the first commitment period, they are not going to exhaust it. As I said, the only reduction that is required is about 2.5 billion ton. it's already 7 to 12 billion ton. So they want this hot air to be transferred to the next trench of commitment if it comes about, then they want it transferred. That is on the agenda on Durban right now. So the reality is that with CDM and hot air, developed countries don't need to do anything. And they do it quite cheaply. And that's where, and the next slide is about, what's the price of CDM right now? You know, day before yesterday, I looked at the price of CERs being sold in European exchange. Right now it is 6.8 euro per ton of carbon dioxide. It's a rock bottom price. Okay, and it has remained like this for the last 1 year. There are many reasons for this. One, there is oversupply of CERs, as I said. There's so many projects coming in. But think about it, India wants nuclear energy to become part of CDM because it says nuclear energy is carbon neutral. Saudi Arabia wants carbon capture and storage sequestration from fossil fuel to become CDM project and give offset to developed countries. And everyone wants RED Plus project to become offset. Now, if all these three comes about and the world agrees that they will contribute to offset for developed countries, think about the level of CERs that will be available on the global market and what will be its impact on the price. I'm expecting that you will get CERs at $1 if all these three comes about: RED, nuclear, and CCS. The second reason, there is uncertainty in the market today that what will happen after 2012, whether the developed countries will take second commitment period for Kyoto or not. Even though Cancun agreement says that the market mechanism, that is CDM, like mechanism will continue in the future. And the third is, European Union has decided that for the third, you have European Union emission trading scheme, and the third phase of EU ETS is going to start. They now say that we will only buy CERs from least developing countries, simply because, as I showed you in the graph, that majority of CERs are coming from India and China, essentially emerging economies. And LDCs are not getting anything, so European Union has decided to buy CERs only from LDCs in the third phase of EU ETS. Essentially, all the Kyoto parties are today meeting their targets cheaply, and there's no transition to the low carbon economy. And that's the next point I'm going to make. Cheaply, I have established they're going to do everything cheaply. They don't need to do anything domestically if they want to, if they don't want to. And that's the issue of additionality. Now, what is additionality? As I explained it to you, a non-additional CDM project is a business as usual project. Would have happened anyway, okay? And therefore, giving carbon credit to such project actually does not represent any real emission reduction. It doesn't represent any real effort. And therefore, you know, these projects should not get CERs, but the most important thing is these projects actually allow developed countries to increase their emission. So you have non-additional projects who have no real emission reduction, but developed countries buy them and then offset it through their domestic emissions. So they can keep increasing their domestic emission through these non-additional projects, which ultimately means that the global emission is going up. It's not coming down. That's one of the fundamental problems with non-additional project. And there are many reasons for non-additional, but one of the major reasons for non-additional is business as usual projects. The estimates are, now there are a lot of research done on additionality, and as you know, the WikiLeaks cable was an additionality issue, that there are now more than 50% registered projects which can be termed non-additional, purely because they are business as usual projects. This will be equivalent to 1 billion CERs by 2012, 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalent as non-additional project, okay? So the developed countries can emit 1 billion ton of CO2 extra. Our companies in India will get few $1 billion, and on the balance sheet it will be shown as reduction. That's the problem of non-additional project. And the world will suffer because a 1 billion ton extra of carbon dioxide will be there in atmosphere. So now let's look at non-additional. What do I mean by non-additional project through two examples that I'm going to show you today. You know, there are around 39 projects from India that have been rejected by CDM board, which is about 21% of all rejected projects. It looks pretty even-handed because India also has 21% registered projects. So about 21% of all rejected projects are from India. And if you look at rejected project, and this is largely because they have been termed as financially not additional. It means they would have happened in business as usual because it is financially lucrative without even CDM. 8 wind project, 5 hydro project, 15 biomass, 8 waste heat, 2 energy, and recently 1 supercritical coal power plant. So these 39 projects, this is the breakup. And if you look at it, biomass is 1/4 of our pie. So majority of projects that have been rejected is biomass project. Wind is another 1/4, 8 wind project, and hydro. So the majority of rejections have been in area which are also our major CDM basket, CDM projects. Let's look at wind project. With one example, in 2006, Bajaj Auto's 2 major wind projects, equivalent in combined capacity of about 65 megawatt in Maharashtra, was rejected by CDM board, saying that it is financially non-additional. It means these projects are financially viable, so you don't have to come to CDM board. Now the PDD of the project said it is unviable, but the annual report of the same company in 2002 said the project is extremely beneficial on a standalone basis and has a payback period of 3 years and an internal rate of return in excess of 28%. It was based on what Bajaj Auto had written 4 years back that this project was rejected. So Bajaj Auto actually had said something else in its financial report, said something else in the project document to the CDM. So this project was a clear case of non-additional financially, even a wind project, but I'll tell you why a wind project is a non-additional project. The PricewaterhouseCoopers, the consultant of this project, actually came under huge pressure. They publicly went and said, all the wind projects in Maharashtra are non-additional. Okay? And therefore, in future, we will advise clients to avoid a paper trail regarding the attractiveness of their projects. So we will advise, don't write your project is very attractive if you want to apply for CDM. That's what Bajaj Auto, PricewaterhouseCoopers, this consultant, publicly stated. Okay? Now, we all know, and this is a fact, no one wants to write about it, that wind project in India is attractive on its own because of tax incentive and preferential tariff that Government of India gives. With 80% accelerated depreciation and preferential tariff in different states, because of government initiative, wind projects are additional. In fact, most of the project will have internal rate of return of more than 16%, okay, which is financially viable. But we have financial data which is cooked up to get CDM projects, okay. Government of India does no checks. And actually in WikiLeaks, one of the bank is stated to have said that project proponents make 2 financial sheets, one for banks and other for CDM board. So actually Yes Bank person is quoted in saying in CDM to the WikiLeaks, that the companies, those who apply for CDM make 2 financial sheet, one for the bank and one for the CDM board. But we have to understand why wind sector is non-additional. Wind sector is a leapfrog sector. It gives us renewable energy and should qualify for CDM. Wind sector is non-additional because Government of India supports it. Wind sector is not, if Government of India support is not there, then all the wind sector project will be non-viable. So because Government of India supports it, because there is a public subsidy to the wind sector, it is a non-additional project and can be rejected. And therefore all this cooking of data happens. So we need a reform in CDM which allows for government support but also allows for CDM projects to come up. Okay? And that's a major problem right now in additionality. Okay? If government has a law that mandates emission cut or gives public subsidy, then all these projects will not qualify for CDM. Okay? And the result is a perverse incentive for the government to do nothing. Okay? Because government wants its companies to earn money through CDM, it will do nothing domestically. So CDM is actually a perverse incentive for the government to do nothing. Okay? And as I said, data is cooked up, all kind of corruption happens because of that. So that's the major problem. So the fact is, and that should shock all of us, that a coal-based power plant will get CDM, but a solar power plant under National Solar Mission will not get CDM. That's the reality of clean development mechanism. Okay, so none of the projects under National Solar Mission will get CDM because it is government supported. Despite the fact that these solar thermal power plant will cost 20 times more than a coal-based power plant. Let me get back to coal-based power plant. It's a major problem area today in CDM, and I'll spend 2-3 minutes on it. We did recently we did some research on this, and in fact, Down to Earth also reported on this issue. Few months back, you would have heard news flashed all across that Reliance has got 2,000 crore rupees CDM bonanza. That was splashed everywhere, okay? And this was because Reliance Power is setting up a super thermal power plant of about 4,000 megawatt in Tilaiya, and it had got registered at CDM. Fortunately, one of our colleagues was in that area, so we asked her to go and see this project. 2,000 crore rupees project, one of the biggest projects in India as far as CDM is concerned. So we were also, interested to know what is happening on the project. So our colleague went there. She couldn't find the project for 2 days. She kept running around. Where is the project? No one knew. Okay. Therefore, the project site is not finalized. There is no demarcation of the land. There is no board, which shows that this project of 4,000 megawatt super thermal power is coming up here. The land is not acquired. In fact, a case has been filed because Reliance has illegally encroached 16 hectares of land from a village. So a case has already been filed against the project, but Reliance has not acquired the land. The project has yet not achieved financial closure. It means banks are still not ready to give it money. Okay. The PDD consultant did a stakeholder meeting in Hazaribagh, which is about 100 kilometers away from the project site, with 7 people in a hotel, including the district collector. So district collector was a major stakeholder. And the DOE validated the project without going to the site. In fact, it is written in the DOE project that the project is non-existent. Okay? And talked to the stakeholder over phone. And said, this is an additional project. And Government of India then said it is a sustainable project. And then it got 2,000 crore rupees. Okay? This is what is there.
And who was the consultant? Please give us names.
DNV.
And we tried to get them here. Mr. Bose, you really need to figure them out. Nobody wants to come and talk to people.
TUV, sorry, TUV.
We tried to get TUV here to speak to us. They do not even want to come in front of public. I think you should blacklist such consultants straight away. Okay? We'll come to it. Okay? But I think there's a real flaw in the Government of India here.
Okay. The fact is, that the data was cooked up so well in the Reliance PDD that the CDM board said it is an additional project. And that the CDM board also said if there was no CDM money, then instead of supercritical power plant, Reliance would have installed subcritical power plant. The data was so well cooked up. The fact is, all the ultra mega power plant projects are competitively won. Okay? So these are competitive bidding. And therefore, if you have won it competitively, it means it's a financially viable project. And secondly, this graph will show you that supercritical is gone in this country now. We only have subcritical is gone in this country. In fact, 2014 is the last year for all the subcritical plant in this country to get commissioned, major projects. You will still have 30 megawatt, 20 megawatt subcritical small project coming up. But as far as large projects are considered, subcritical is gone. In India, it is only supercritical. So neither this project was financially additional, nor it was technologically additional. And still CDM board cleared it. without it being existent on the ground. And Government of India too cleared it. Okay, and it gives bad name to the country. It's as simple as that. We will be called corrupt. Okay, so that's the state. Just because Reliance, we want to give 2,000 crore rupees to Reliance. The fact is, Reliance project got 2,000 crore. A similar project, Tata Mundra project, stupid Tata Mundra project, got rejected. The same project, India's first supercritical power plant, got rejected because it didn't cook up the data very well. Okay, the same project, 4,000 megawatt in Mundra, got rejected. So, the problem of coal supercritical plant today is there are 37 Indian projects in the pipeline. There are 14 Chinese projects in the pipeline for coal supercritical. All of them are non-additional. Okay. These 45 projects will be equivalent to 455 million tons of carbon dioxide in next 10 years. Okay. Fortunately, CDM board has recently reviewed and found that these projects also cook up data in terms of how much emission reduction will happen. And it actually found that they do cook up by as much as 70%. So the methodology under which these projects are applying for CDM have been suspended right now. That's a fortunate. But still, CDM board is not saying these are not additional projects. They are still saying these are additional projects. Okay. So I have shown you two examples. Wind, which should be additional, but is not additional because of government subsidy and a perverse incentive that CDM gives to the government. The second case of coal, which should not be additional, but is called additional and given clearance. So this is the problem of CDM. Okay. As I said, cheap emission, large majority non-additional, perverse incentive, not leading to any transition in low carbon economy. That's the CDM. In fact, this graph, we did it in 2006. If you want to transit to low carbon economy, then you have to pay a lot more money. Okay, not €6, that is the price of CERs right now. If you want to move from road freight to railways, every ton of carbon dioxide will cost you $200. Okay, and the world should be willing to pay because that's the major transition that should happen. If you want to go for solar power plant, then you have to pay anywhere between $60 to $80 per ton of carbon dioxide. Okay, if you want, offshore or onshore wind, you have to give anywhere between $70 to $20 per ton of carbon dioxide. So the cost for transition is very high, which the developed world is not willing to pay. And that is why you have this problem in the CER. What's the way out? We very strongly believe that CDM should only be for high-end transformational project. Okay, if the world has to move to low carbon economy, if we want to move out of fossil fuel, then it should be only for transformational project. It should not be for coal and a small waste heat recovery project. Okay, those are non-additional. We also now have emission reduction targets in many ways. India has committed to reduce its emission intensity by 25% by 2020. How we are going to meet that? Are we going to double count? So we will sell CDM to the Europeans and count it as our emission reduction as well. Are we going to do that? So if India has to meet its target on its own, so there is a problem of double counting as well. Developing country like India can also count CDM money that it has got. Okay, but if India has to meet 20-25% target, then it has to do things on its own. So it will also require low-hanging fruit to meet its emission target. So if we want CDM to operate and lead to transformation, then it has to be for transformational high-end project. I think CDM, this perverse incentive for government has to go. The government policy and CDM will have to work together. Maybe some support can be given by the government and the money can come from CDM. So there can be policy support and money from CDM. That kind of arrangement have to be done. And secondly, we will have to introduce accountability for these consultants. It's as simple as that. That's one of the major problems with CDM. So with this, I've finished my presentation and we'll take questions later.